So, first off, thank you guys so much for coming on. I'm going to introduce our guests here in a second, or allow them to introduce themselves, rather. I'm really excited about this one, especially. We got some really great catching guys here, and I'd love to learn a lot more. I know that me personally, I'm going to grow from this, and I hope that you guys that have spent your afternoon here with us also grow as well too. At the conclusion of this, we're going to open it up to Q&A. So hold your questions to the end. You can write them in the group chat if you'd like, and we'll answer some questions. Essentially, what we're going to do here is we're going to list off a question, and we'll kind of go around the circle to each one of our panelists, and then kind of stem from conversation, go into conversation from there. After we're finished up here, I'm going to upload this onto YouTube. So if you'd like to share it with anybody, if you'd like to refer back to it, it'll be up. Just ask me for the link, and I'll have that up there for you. But first and foremost, my name is Marsh. I'm an assistant baseball coach. I'd like to introduce, going forward, Josh Kieffer. Josh, do you want to introduce yourself?
Josh Kieffer. I'm going in, I guess, my second year at Maine now. I was at Amherst College before this, and Clark University before that. I coached in the Cape Cod League with the Chatham A's. I coached in NECBL with the Sanford Mainers. So I've done that in the summer. But, really excited to learn from some of you guys as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Mange?
Joe Mangiameli, catching coach with the Minnesota Twins. Spent 4 years in the college game, 3 at Eastern Connecticut State, and most recently last year at Quinnipiac. Stoked to chop it up, you fellas.
Awesome. Thank you, Mange. Doc?
Yeah, guys, Doc Neiman. I'm the head baseball coach at Clarion University, Division II program in Western PA. This is my first year as a head coach. I just finished up. It's been 1 year as assistant here, 1 year as assistant at Erskine College down in South Carolina, and 4 years at Division III to sales in Eastern PA.
Great. Thank you, Doc. Bucky?
How's it going, guys? Sean Buchanan here, assistant baseball coach and recruiting coordinator at Albright College. Just finished up what would have been my first year at Albright. Prior to that, spent time at DeSales University, Ave Maria University down in Florida, New Paltz State, Bard College, and Dutchess Community College.
Awesome. Thank you, Bucky. Thanks for coming on. So let's dive right into it. My first question is, what do you feel is most important as a catcher, and what are some of the ways that you would train that? Keith, you want to start us?
Sure. I think one of the most important things, obviously, is receiving. That's the thing that you're going to do the most. I mean, blocking's important, throwing's important. But, you might get a chance to throw out maybe 2 guys a game, 3 guys a game if you're lucky, maybe 3 or 4 blocks a game. But you're receiving every pitch. So I think receiving is definitely the most important thing a catcher can do. There's a lot of ways to train it. I think the best way is just to catch live as much as possible. If you have a pitching machine, catching off the pitching machine, I think is the next best thing to live. Obviously, bullpens. Bullpens, take those very seriously if you're a young catcher. Nothing's better than catching bullpens. You can work on everything you need in a bullpen session. There's a lot of tools you can use to work on receiving. We use a mini glove a lot. It's like a smaller version of a regular glove. The pocket's a lot smaller, so you have to catch it in the pocket or it's going to fall out. You can do a lot of bare hand drills to work on your receiving. But yeah, I think receiving is the most important thing a catcher can work on.
Awesome. Thank you, Keith. Mange?
Yeah, it didn't leave much meat on the bone, but I think when we look at what to value in any space, it's what happens at the highest frequency and then what happens at the highest value. I think a large majority of kind of our training needs to be centered on that skill set. In the catching space, it's receiving at every level. I think what you'll see too is as you progress down in the game, so from the big league levels on down, receiving is actually more important because the value of a strike dramatically increases. So kind of how I like to phrase it to guys is that ground ball to a big league shortstop is pretty much a guaranteed out. That ground ball, even in Division I college baseball, is not guaranteed. So the only real way to kind of limit the production of an offense is optimized for punch outs. So that ties directly back to kind of our efforts behind the plate. So the faster we can punch a dude out, his run expectancy is 0. There's no shot he's going to score. And even simpler, the faster we can get him 2 strikes. Sure, we got a lot of hitting guys on this call. Like, we don't do damage with 2 strikes. So from our perspective, what's going to happen the most? What's going to give us the most value? And how can we impact the game the most? Training it wise, I think it's more kind of a mindset than anything. You need to be obsessive. Need to really value it. I think one of the reasons we've kind of grown immensely in this space with the Twins is we have a really strong culture, and guys take pride in how they're catching the baseball, and they want to catch the baseball. How to train it? Coach mentioned some good things, like bullpens are super important. Working on a machine, trying to get some representative practice. I think anytime you have a glove on your hand, you can be working on your pattern, working on your timing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in a game setting. You can always be working on it. It's a pretty easy and transferable skill.
Awesome. Thank you, Mange. Bucky, what do you got to weigh in here?
I think the most important aspect for catchers is, like everyone has said already, receiving. It's what you're going to do the most. It's how you're going to impact the game the most. You know, when you're thinking about how one strike can influence an at-bat, I mean, the swings in batting average from 2-1 to 1-2 are drastic. So instilling that mindset and understanding the importance of a strike and instilling the idea that we can affect what's a strike and what's not. So I think that's the most important thing that catchers can do in today's game. And ways to train it, they're really limitless. Obviously, you have to grasp the urgency of your bullpens. That's first and foremost, because it's not just in catching. It's pretty much in any other space. There is nothing better than actually doing the task. Now, it's not realistic for us to always be catching live pitchers. So in the downtime, we have to find ways to get creative and be as innovative as possible to keep it interesting, because it can be at times a boring skill to someone who hasn't quite grasped the importance of what it is. So I think making it fun, making it interactive, and being innovative is kind of how you start to breed that love for the craft of catching. So nothing more important than receiving the baseball. And as far as training it goes, the options are really limitless.
Great. Thank you, Bucky. Doc, what do you got to finish up here?
Not much left to talk about. I mean, definitely agree with those guys, and receiving is by far one of the biggest things. I'll also throw in there, being a leader on the field, I think, is also very important. That's something that's probably taken away from and not looked upon with catchers. And that just goes to, dictating on cut calls or, making appropriate bunt coverage calls. Knowing that kind of stuff is a part of the game that I think is not taught enough to younger guys, especially. We even see it in our college levels now and the different levels that we have with guys on here. Just understanding those kind of situations and making sure we're not panicking when those big plays come up. If we got a play at the plate or a chance to win to cut a runner off at a base, making those calls at the appropriate time and helping our team, win a game from that aspect of it. Being vocal, being loud, being commanding, and being front and forward with it, that guys understand and respect what you're calling out. I think that goes a long way with the leadership. Training that is just putting yourselves in the situations. A lot of guys in the college level will do the 21, 27 out game with fungos, with base runners. That's a great way to have base running involved with it, and so your catcher can make those calls as they're going through in a game life situation, and then just inter squads as well. But I think the more that catchers can develop that sense of thing goes a long way once they get into higher levels and even, professional baseball.
Absolutely. Now, what I think is interesting, and I'm totally in agreement, is, when we go to these, pro style workouts, and you go to all these showcases, there's such an emphasis in the showcase game of, throwing and your pop time and all of that. And, you guys all hit the nail on the head, and I totally agree that receiving's number one. Keith, I've heard you say this before. I mean, catching a bullpen is like your batting practice. You train so many different stances. You're working on things to make yourself better. And if you really want to be an elite receiver, I feel that you need to take every single rep as you would as an infielder or an outfielder in BP, that way in bullpens. So really good stuff to start off. Anybody have anything to add before we move forward? All good here? Okay. Let's start with, we'll go with Bucky to start on this one. In your playing and coaching career, what is one teaching point you would view as a game changer? What's something that's, really allowed your guys to take it to the next level, or something that's allowed you to get to the next level as a defender?
I think it's understanding optics and what the umpire is seeing, the idea of depth perception, and how you can manipulate that in the process of receiving. A lot of people, they used to teach, a lot of snatch and grab and pushing the baseball a lot and curling your wrist and doing all these things to get the baseball closer to the actual strike zone. And it's not necessarily the most viewable thing going on behind you. So everything we do, we kind of reverse engineer, like, okay, what's the umpire seeing here? And how does this work? And how is this going to train? So I think that's like a game-changing point, is when you understand that what you're doing with your hand needs to be seen by the umpire. How is he going to see it? How's he going to perceive it? I think from there we can build movement patterns that will help promote strikes and make us better receivers.
I love it. I love it. When we were down at the ABCA, I love seeing that too, with the Yankees coach, showing guys videotape from behind to give the umpires perspective and show that to the catchers. I think that's awesome for catchers to see. Keith, what do you got to piggyback off of that?
I mean, yeah, I agree with that. The way I think about it is like there's more than one way to do it right. I remember, when I was a catcher, a lot of times I would hear, this is the way you have to do it. And, I'd get in that stance and it just wouldn't feel comfortable. Or I felt like, the way I was doing it, it was easier for me. Like back in the day, nobody really set up on one knee. That wasn't really something they did. They would say you were lazy or you weren't that flexible. And now you see guys setting up on one knee all the time. Now you see guys setting up on one knee when there's runners on base even. Working on blocking from one knee, working on throwing guys out from one knee. So that's just something that's kind of changed over the years. Is there's more than one right way to do it. And just because it doesn't work for one guy, doesn't mean it's not going to work for somebody else. Everybody's body type's a little bit different. Everybody's a little more flexible. So finding out kind of what works for that player, that catcher, and then kind of, using that for everybody else. So that's the big thing for me is, find what's comfortable, find what's effective, find what works. It doesn't necessarily have to work for everybody.
Awesome. Great insight. Manch, what do you got?
Yeah, and I think my point kind of can be applied to numerous spaces, but can we make the main thing, and in both how we attack our training and then how we're going to kind of style our game. I think it's important for players to formulate a training economy that represents the demands of a game. So we can't go into practice and practice receiving, blocking, and throwing kind of on an equal level, because they're not going to occur that way in a game. So kind of staggering your practice, kind of pushing your chips farther into the corners of the skills that we're going to need to do at a high frequency and both a high level. I think inside of that, it's also important that just because the game says we're going to do X, Y, and Z at a certain frequency, like if you're lacking in some part of your game, like your training economy kind of needs to reflect that. So yes, receiving is going to happen the most, but if you're a piss poor blocker, you might need to spend a little bit more time there. And I think you can't just create a plan on day one of practice and that's your plan. Like it's going to ebb and flow and alter throughout the course of the season, kind of with your skill level. So always be cognitive. Like I would frequency is a big one. So like what's happening in the game, value of each skill, but then ultimately what's going to drive it is athlete proficiency. So main thing, and kind of place our attention where it's most needed.
Really good. Love it. Doc, give me one thing that was a game changer for you?
Yeah, I mean, these guys hit a lot of good points on that. I think one thing that really stuck with me, and like they said, you know, the game is evolving from one knee to throwing to our exchange and everything. And I had different catching coaches throughout college and had a chance to work in the Phillies organization while I was still in college as a bullpen catcher and learning from those guys how to slow the game down as a catcher. You know, playing at Division III school where you might not see velocity so much and catching AAA guys, you know, throwing upper 90s and touching 100, you know, how to slow that down, how to understand that, you know, if we're reaching out farther for things and trying to go get the baseball, we're actually making it tough on ourselves. And, you know, you start getting that panic mode back there as catchers. You know, even though it's a bullpen setting, you still get that stress. You still get that excitement when you're back there. And at least I did. And I know I caught some pens this year for our guys, and I still got it. You know, where's the pitch going to be? And, you know, should I let it get too deep? How's the break going to happen? And just slowing it down, relaxing your mind, relaxing your eyes, relaxing your wrist, and allowing yourself to just let the game come to you, to let the ball come to you from a catching standpoint. And off that, you know, one thing in college was probably my exchange, which really helped me go throughout my college. I was a big catch and pull to my ear guy, like we mentioned. My catching coach late in college, who's now at Stony Brook, really helped me get my exchange done out in front in the middle of my body, and that really took my throwing game to the next level. Obviously, I was not elite, but it helped me be a lot better, getting the ball out sooner and getting the ball out to second base.
Awesome. I love it, Doc. I love it. You know, for me, you know, in coming into the University of Maine, you know, prior to being here, you know, catching was the position that I knew the least about. And I had learned a lot from Coach Durba and from, you know, things like this and going to the ABCA and listening to great people and talking to guys like yourself, you know, just out on the road and just kind of growing as I learned from conversation. But one thing for me that I think really stuck out in my mind is, you know, my knowledge of catching was basically limited to the older, you got to stick everything type of deal as far as receiving goes. And somebody said something to me once, and he's like, you know, our job as catchers is to keep strikes, you know, and that's a huge thing. And, you know, that, you know, for me was like, okay, if the pitch is, you know, 8 inches off the plate and we got guys that are pulling it back in, like it's making it more difficult for everything else, you know, to come. So that was something for me that kind of was a light bulb early in my coaching career that, you know, it's, you know, now evolving even further, just listening to you guys, and I love it. Let's go back to you, Doc. We'll start with you on this one because I put you last twice, so I want to swing you back to on that. Technology. Give me something that you've done with your catchers from a technology standpoint. How have you implemented it in training to make these guys better?
Yeah, one thing we do here is, you know, we videotape a lot of their bullpens, a lot of their individual works when we break down the indie stuff. And that goes from them just receiving pens and off the machine to watching their footwork, second base to third base, watching their exchange, watching their blocking form. So we don't get too crazy with it. And, you know, I'm sure there's a lot more technology out there that is capable to use it. But, you know, one of the main things is just letting them watch themselves and how they go about it, you know, their daily work. So I think that's important because, you know, we were on this yesterday talking some hitting and a little bit of everything. The more these guys understand and see what they're doing, I think helps them relate and teach it better to themselves. You can say it to your blue in the face, hey, you got to get underneath that baseball on a low pitch. And they said, yeah, I know. But until they actually see that they're not doing it or that they are doing it, I think will make, you know, your catchers a lot better. You know, one thing that we also do from a training standpoint, it's not necessarily technology, is we chart a lot of stuff with our guys. So, you know, I want to call it technology, obviously, but, you know, we do send out reports to our catchers through an Excel sheet that we have that they can kind of see their trackings over their bullpen sessions.
Awesome. Great stuff. Great stuff. Bucky, what do you got?
Well, I think technology can be a pretty broad thing. I think when you mention technology, people think TrackMan and stuff like that. You know, these things that we don't all really have access to. I consider technology anything that is outside of the norm that we can implement to help our guys get better. And I get in trouble all the time here with my girlfriend because I got Amazon packages that come like every other day with some just weird gadget. And I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know, but we're going to try it. So I try to look outside of baseball into other spaces like tennis and boxing, anything I could find as a tool that we can add to our toolbox. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe our guys think it works, and that's good enough. But to be a little more exact, I mean, I get pitching machine. To me, there's no piece of technology better than a pitching machine, a good one, 3 wheels where you can mix and spin and stuff like that, and some beat up baseballs to go with it. So it's not exactly true flight every single pitch, because that's as close as we're going to get to replicating the reps we get in a game or in a bullpen. So if we can mix that into practice as much as possible, I think that is a tremendous benefit for our guys. So pitching machine would be the top piece of technology for me.
Awesome. What do you got, Manch?
Yeah, I think one of the perks of my current job is that I get access to a lot of tools. So in the short camp we had, it's Rapsodo, force plate, smoke cap, like using it all. And like Sean said, I think in the catching space now we have a lot more questions than answers. At least that's my perspective on it. So again, we don't know if that stuff works. We're trying to collect as much as possible. I think one important point to hit on is I think data is absolutely necessary from a developmental standpoint. Like if you're not using it, you're doing your players a huge disservice. But knowing that like data and tech are independent of one another. Like you don't need tech in order to use data. Like charts, video, like you can gather a lot without spending any money. And again, like all tech does, it's more efficient to collect, and it opens some doors to measure some new things. But it's only as useful as the guy kind of using it. So it can be your best friend, or it can also be an expensive paperweight. I think in the catching space, at least, like the tech that's come out, it's kind of driven our training because it's kind of opened our eyes to what's important. Even 10 years ago, we weren't able to quantify things like we are now. So through tech, like now we can see and rank guys out on their receiving, which you kind of need some more expensive tech to do. But there's some simple hacks. Like last year at Quinnipiac, what we'd do is we would film every bullpen or live session, and I would overlay a strike zone, like the K zone you see on TV. And I didn't use it as a way to kind of quantify our efforts, because you can't. But what it would allow me to do is kind of identify our weaknesses, and that would kind of drive our training going forward. So a couple things you need to kind of be cognizant of is if you are going to do something like that, filming from the same spot, so it's at least objective from day to day. But what you can go back and really get specific with what you're targeting, with struggling with certain pitchers, struggling with certain pitch types, struggling with a certain zone. And that way it's not kind of at the end of the day, I felt good, I felt bad. You look good, you look bad, but like, hey man, you're struggling with this pitcher on this pitch in this zone. And again, I think everyone has access to an iPhone or a cheap camera and some free editing software, and that's really all it takes. But a little bit of legwork, but kind of a poor man's TrackMan, if you want to say.
Awesome. I love it. That's good stuff. Keith, what do you got?
I agree with the pitching machine and the video are the two basic pieces of technology that you're going to need. Throw a tripod in there. You can set your camera up. A lot of the pitching machines you can set with a timer. It'll feed itself. You guys can get a lot of work in, just on your own. The slow-mo video on the camera is huge. A lot of the iPhones now all have slow-mo. So if you can film stuff in slow motion, makes it a lot easier to kind of go back and look at. But those are the two main pieces of technology that we use is the pitching machine and the cell phone video.
Awesome. Great stuff, Keith. And thank you for not stealing my thunder because I wanted to talk about Synergy again.
I know how much you like that.
You know, I do like Synergy. Mange knows that too. But again, I'm going to talk about it in a similar way. I spoke about it last night is that, you know, some people in this room might not have Synergy. Some might have it. But, you know, it kind of goes to the point of what Mange was saying. You know, if you have it, it provides a lot of different data points that you can take from it. You know, you can take a look at pitches that were in the zone and, you know, see how well your catchers are doing. You can show them video of when they're doing something right, when they're doing something wrong. You can show them video of other guys as well too. But there's other ways to do that. It takes a little bit more legwork. It takes a little bit more work as a coach. But taking video of bullpens is a great way, as we mentioned before, taking video in game, charting things from the dugout, having a pitcher chart it, or having, you know, a student assistant or anybody on the staff, you know, chart what guys are doing and what happens more often. And that creates more buy-in when you go into training as well too, in addition to working on things that guys are struggling with. Going forward on to our next question. From an athleticism or flexibility standpoint, you know, and this is a very broad question, many of these are, but what is something that you've done with your guys, you know, to enhance their athleticism or enhance their flexibility, you know, to meet the demands of being a catcher? Buck, you want to start us?
Yeah. So about 2 years ago, I was Mr. Flexibility. I mean, we were doing everything. We were doing 50-50 switches. We're going over hurdles, under hurdles. We're doing all this kinds of stuff. But more recently, I've kind of drifted away from it a little bit. And instead of trying to create athleticism kind of out of thin air, it turns more into working within the confines of what the athlete can do. And that has led me to doing more movement assessment on guys to better understand what they can and can't do instead of asking them to do something that maybe they're physically not ready for and then wondering why they can't do it. Oh, maybe his hips are just tight. Maybe we need to, you know, his hamstrings are too tight. And to steal a page from Eugene Bleecker with 108 performance, you know, if you're holding on to the back of a car and you're on a skateboard and the car starts to drive forward, like you're going to be okay. You're going to hang on to the car. It's going to carry you along. But what if there's 100-foot of rope attached to the car and you're hanging on to that rope, and then that rope is uncoiling as the car is driving away? All of a sudden, oh, it's going to yank you, right? So sometimes being too loose is not a good thing. So you have to be more individualized. So going back to movement screening and assessments to better understand the athletes is kind of where I'm at now. So those are my thoughts on the flexibility aspect.
That's some great content right there. I love it, Bucky. Doc, hit me. What do you got? You're on mute, Doc.
There we go. All right. Like Buck was talking about, every catcher is different. You know, every guy we have in our you know college here is different. We got tall, lanky one to a shorter one. So I think, you know, understanding what kind of catcher they are, what kind of their body type is, dictates how we kind of get them going and get them, you know, more athletic to their standard. Our catchers, you know, going back to a basic, we have our catchers do like a hip mobility stretch every single day, where it's just some leg swings, sideways, forward, you know, doing down on all fours and kind of doing like the fire hydrant pulls out, kickbacks, getting their hips loose. We do like the ankle rolls with our guys so they get their ankles loose, since that's our main position that we're being in. You know, we are catching. We use PVC piping. I know we talked PVC piping last night from a hitting standpoint. We do a lot of that with our stretching when they're down in their squats, you know, when they're in their stances and their movements that way. So, again, real easy stuff. But I think going bigger picture, again, understanding what kind of catcher they are and what their body type is will dictate their bigger overall flexibility.
Awesome. Keith, weigh in here. What do you got?
I mean, I think having some type of program is definitely needed. We had a yoga instructor come in this year, work with all of our guys. I didn't make it to it, but Coach Marsh made it to a lot of those. But having some type of plan, some type of stretching routine is good for you guys. Basically, you know, you're trying to get low so you can work underneath the pitch. So the more flexible you are, you know, the lower you can get in your stance, the easier it's going to be to work underneath the ball and not have it drag your glove out of the zone. So, you know, some guys are just built differently. Everybody's hips are a little bit different. Everybody's hamstrings are a little bit different. Like I said, basically what you're just trying to do is see how low you can get. And if you can work underneath the baseball, it's going to make it a lot easier to receive. You're going to get a lot more strikes called. But having some type of routine to follow, either before practice or after practice, is key for everybody.
Awesome. I love it. Thanks for the shout out on the yoga. Mange, what do you got?
Yeah, these guys are way better than me. I just throw them on a knee. No, but flexibility and athleticism, they're super important. They're gonna unlock some different movement solutions for you, different ways you can attack a problem. With that being said, I don't think it's critical. I think we're finding now there's a lot of different ways to set up back there that kind of work for everyone. Experimentation and knowing not everyone's going to be the same. You can look at all 18 of my guys. They look different. They all have a knee down, but they all look different. So there's not one way to do it. Be adaptable, continue to work on your limitations, but can we set up in a way now that kind of fits kind of our strengths?
Awesome. Keith, I'm going to start with you on this next question. Let's give the players in the audience or even the coaches something that, you know, they could suggest to their guys. What's something that, you know, with respect to social distancing, the guys here in this room, those that are viewing this, can do to make themselves a better catcher? What's a drill or some sort of piece of advice that you have for these guys?
Yeah, I mean, we already talked about stretching. That's something obviously you can do every day when you get up. We have a lot of our guys do that in the morning when they get up. You know, go through a quick stretch, work on your flexibility, put a little strength training involved. The next big thing I would say is you can work on your transfer very easily. You can either do it with your bare hand or with your glove. But just put a ball in your glove and work on getting it out of your glove and finding that four-seam grip as fast as you can. Like we talked about, transferring out in front of your body, not bringing it to your ear as much. But if you can get that ball into your throwing hand, the quicker you start moving your feet, the quicker you start your throw. So I would say working on your transfer, working on your grip is something you can easily do. You can throw a ball off the wall, catch it, find your four-seam grip. Those are things you can do every day. You don't even need a partner to do it.
Awesome. Love it. Mange, what do you got to add?
Work on your hitting. No. I'm sure you guys all have buddies who are pitchers, so kind of be the guy who wants to catch all the pens. I'm pretty sure social distance 6 feet, mountain 60 feet 6 inches, so you're good on that front. But catch as much as you can. Have a younger brother, older brother, mom, dad, like have them throw stuff at you. Pretty simple. Just catch as much as you can. It doesn't necessarily have to be a baseball.
Good stuff. Bucky.
I think from a physical standpoint, should be foam rolling every day. I mean, we just kind of touched on some flexibility stuff, but muscular health is going to be huge to try and maintain throughout this quarantine, where maybe we're not doing as much, and you know the backs get a little bit sore and you get a little bit tight from sitting on the couch watching Netflix all day every day. Get off the couch, foam roll, the break up the fascia and keep your muscles healthy. And then on top of that, there's no reason why you can't learn something about the game every single day. I think everybody on this call gets that concept, but there are so many resources out there. Reach out to somebody, find something new on Twitter, watch an ABCA video, anything. Just make sure you learn something every day as well, because there's no better time than right now to take in information.
Doc, what do you got?
Yeah, I think, starting from a younger standpoint, I think one of the things, high school coaches, college coaches look at is sometimes these kids' stances. So like Buck was saying, guys are watching Netflix, you guys are playing Fortnite, whatever, get down in your stance and squat a little bit. Get used to being in the stance. One thing it's going to do, like we just talked about with flexibility, is work on your hips, work on your balance, work on your stances, getting your primary, getting your secondary stance while you're watching TV, during commercials, playing video games, etc. And then, these guys touch base on it. You can practice your exchange using a tennis ball off the wall. You can have mom and dad flip tennis balls to you all day and work on your receiving, getting the thumb underneath, being soft. You can progress from that using your transfer, your footwork to second base, to third base, throwing from your knees. I mean, there's so many variations that you can add to every little thing that you guys do from a training standpoint right now. And on top of that, make sure you're getting out and staying, moving around. On the nice days, go outside and do some light jogs. Throw the ball off the wall and do some things like that. Work on your bunts. Those are all things that you can do with limited space and staying social distancing. I mean, heck, use a rolled up pair of socks. And it's essentially the same kind of thing, inside. So a lot of options.
Awesome. I'm glad you mentioned throwing the ball off the wall. That's what I was going to go with. Is I'm going to take this in a different light. Some of the best things that I've seen done for catchers at times can be, putting them in different positions, putting them in different places. Teaching them to do things as infielders sometimes could be really good because of the similarities between the two, in regard to, where they're transferring from. Some similarities in a sense as far as footwork can go in a little bit, but just, throwing the ball off the wall, doing everything that you can on your own, and take advantage of this time, because it will show once we get back, as baseball will be back and it will be better, and you need to be better if you want to be ready for it. My next question is, we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit. We're going to go back to a little bit more on the coaching side, but this is also, baseball intelligence for catchers. Keith, what do you got on something that you look for in pitch calling? What's one piece of advice to the catchers that might be doing it, or something that you've learned throughout your time as a catcher or catching coach?
I mean, first of all, for all the young catchers, hopefully your coaches are letting you guys call the game. I think that's a big part of a young catcher, is learning how to call a game. If your coach is calling the game, make sure you're talking with him, asking him why he's calling certain pitches, trying to learn, what he's thinking. But I think, calling pitches for a catcher is one of the fun parts of being a baseball player. When you get a strikeout, it wasn't the pitcher that really got the strikeout. You feel like you were a big part of that if you were the one calling the game. I think a big part of situational pitch calling, knowing the score, knowing the inning, knowing who's at the plate, all that goes into account when you're calling pitches. Using the pitcher's strengths rather than looking for a batter's weakness, I think, is big. We talk about that a lot when we go over our scouting reports. If a hitter can't hit a changeup, but our pitcher doesn't necessarily throw a good changeup, doesn't mean we're going to throw it right there. So using the pitcher's strengths, I think, is a really big key when it comes to pitch calling.
I love it. Great stuff. Manch, what do you got?
Yeah, I think, and this has become an area of my job that's kind of been magnified, just because you don't see it too much in the college space, and it'd be greatly appreciated if you guys let your catchers call a game, so when they get to me, I don't have to kind of start from scratch. But I think it's simple. Can you formulate and execute a plan, but also having a little bit of touch and feel of knowing when to freestyle, which I think takes some time. But I think that first thing is, can you look at some of the advanced metrics and knowing your guy in and out and formulate a plan for him and stick to that plan? I think that's like the first step. But game calling's messy. I don't think anyone's quite figured it out yet.
Good stuff. Buck?
I think the most important part of pitch calling is being prepared. If you're fortunate enough to have a scouting report, or have played against a certain team before that you're playing again, or know anything about any of the other hitters on the team, you got to have that in your back pocket. and it's on you to seek out that information. Maybe you don't have any sort of advanced scouting report, but after a kid's first at bat, like, you should be taking mental notes or asking your coach, hey, what did you see? You should be able to tell if he was early, late, on time, and being able to work off of that. Information is king in pitch calling. It shouldn't be guesswork. After you see a guy once, you can start to develop a little more of a game plan as you go. So, like I said, being informed and being prepared is paramount. And as the other guys have said so far, I think being able to live with the pitcher's strength. Rather die on a strength than on a weakness. So don't shy away, regardless of what you think the batter can do. You know what your pitcher can do, and live with that. Awesome.
That's great stuff. Doc, take us home on this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the big question, right? It's like the cat and mouse game is, as a coach and even as a catcher calling games, do you stick with the pitcher's strengths, or do you go after the other guy's weakness? And I think these guys are 100% right. You got to live and die by the pitcher's strengths. I know I called pitches this year in certain situations. Our catcher would look over if he needed help. And that's one of the things, as a staff or as a guy I trust and you have in the catcher is letting him go with it. Take your gut and know what to do. They can see the batter better where they're set up. I think the biggest thing for that is just not getting into a repetitive, pitch calling, scenario. And I'm at fault for it too, from a coaching standpoint. Getting repetitive, calling the same situation, the same scenario to the same guy. Last time we struck him out in 3 pitches, we went fastball, curveball, fastball. You might not get away with that the second time through. They're college hitters. They're going to make adjustments too. So I think that's one of the biggest things is you might have a guy who can do it very, very well, but making sure they understand that they don't get caught up in those kind of situations where they're getting repetitive and predictable from a pitching standpoint.
Something to add to that, Marsh, real quick. We're fortunate enough at Albright. We have one of our alums he's played in the big leagues for a little while. He was in camp with the Twins. So, man, I don't know if you got a chance to meet Casey Lawrence at all, but he's an Albright guy. We're all talking about living and dying with pitchers' strengths, right? And scouting reports and stuff like that. I asked him, because he's faced Mike Trout before. He pitched for the Mariners. So, dude, what does the scouting report on Mike Trout say? I came into the game. They told me, throw your best pitch 3 times and hope he doesn't hit it. That's it. He said straight up. That's what a pitching coach said to me. So, like, seriously, it's live and die with your strength.
I think, if I can add something, I think to kind of piggyback off Buck, like, I think there is an art component to game calling, but I think we need to look at it through more of like a scientific lens. Just because you just threw a pitch doesn't mean we can't throw it again. And just because we pitched them a certain way the first time doesn't mean we can't pitch them that way again. I think we give hitters too much credit. And there's very few guys out there who we need to kind of take into account and kind of know where they're going to hurt us. But I think the large majority of the lineup, you can pitch the same way. And I think even if we are pitching to that guy who can hurt us, like, I think the scale still tips in the pitcher's favor. So kind of in kind of having some information to back it up. I mean, you can get everything you need to know off a pitching chart, but kind of really having a plan to go off of and sticking to that plan and not kind of, yes, be observant, but also don't fall for everything you see, if that makes sense.
No, I totally agree with that. And, it's like you said, there's a balance between it, and the game's going to give you information. You're going to get information from the hitter's takes. You're going to get information from the hitter's swings. You're going to get information as the game goes on. But, that's something I learned here at Maine. But, we talk about the same thing all the time, as Keith said, going with the guy's strengths. If a guy gets a hit, you live with yourself a whole lot better when you're throwing a pitch with intent that is the right pitch. Most of the time, it's not the wrong pitch. It's the wrong location anyway, and with a pitcher missing their spot. Going on to the next question, there's a great conversation there. In communicating with the pitching staff, as a catcher, as a catching coach, advising your catchers, what do you think is most important? What's your best pieces of advice to your catchers on communicating with the staff and making them better? Let's start with you, Buck.
Be honest. Like, that is the most important thing. You know, too many times you catch a bullpen and kid walks down the mound and, you know, you dap him up. Hey, good job, man. Good job. No, it was not a good job. He was just 30% strikes and he couldn't locate anything. That was not good at all. So being honest and providing constructive feedback is one of the most important pieces of communication and one of the most important parts of the pitcher-catcher relationship. Now, don't hammer guys and, you know, tell them that you suck or anything like that, but being realistic, being real with them. Something that I do with our guys to kind of facilitate that kind of conversation. I have our catchers fill out bullpen report cards, a little half sheet of paper, 1 to 5 scale on different pitches with a little spot for comments. And I have them fill it out and we file it and the pitchers get to see it. The catchers get to see it. And, you know, because maybe you didn't get to work with a guy all that much and, you know, he's expected to pitch on a given day where you're going to be behind the plate. Well, real quick, day before the game, let's review his bullpen report cards real quick. All right, and let's see here. Okay, he's hasn't gotten really good grades on glove side fastballs, so he hasn't really been working that. Be aware of that in pregame warmups. Is he there with his glove side fastball today? Is there more of the same thing that we're working on? Maybe you want to avoid that pitch. But it all starts with honesty in the communication process. So that's the biggest piece of the pitcher-catcher relationship for me.
That's great stuff. Mange, what do you got to build off of that?
I think being able to read the room, being adaptable in your approach. You're going to have to communicate with a wide variety of guys. And pitchers are a tough group to kind of work with to begin with. But knowing which guys you can get after and which guys you kind of have to slow down with. I think how you communicate is really important. So you can say the same thing in very different ways. So I think a lot of guys, and this I think can apply to anything, but like if you go up to your pitcher and you're like, hey man, we can't do X, Y, and Z in order to get this guy out, like that's in his brain, right? But if we go up and kind of say the same thing, but like, hey man, if you do this, right, and kind of highlight the positive aspects, I think is huge. And that's more of an art. It takes some tact and some feel and kind of some trial and error. But I think just being a chameleon and being able to read situations is huge.
Love it. Really good stuff. Keith.
I mean, as a catcher, you basically are a pitching coach, especially when you got to go out there for a mound visit. I mean, we at the college level now, you know, you can't take a mound visit every inning. High school, I'm not sure what the rule is now, but, you know, you're limited to how many trips you can take. So you really got to make them count when you go out there. Some of the big things we talk about is positive body language all the time. The pitcher's looking in at you, getting your signs. If you have poor body language, you know, he's not going to feel very good about himself. So always staying positive. When you go out there for a visit, I like telling our guys, always talk about the next pitch. You know, don't always talk about what they did last pitch or what they did wrong. You know, try to get them focused on what they're going to be doing next and what you want them to do, not the negatives. But body language is big. Everybody else on the field is looking in at the catcher. You're the only guy facing, you know, the other direction. So the entire team sees you. So if you have poor body language, you know, that's just going to bring the entire team down. Like I said, you're basically a pitching coach when it comes down to it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Doc.
Stay away. No. Yeah, I mean, these guys hit it right on, you know, being positive with these guys, you know, knowing, and I think it goes back to the question we just talked about before with bullpens and pitch calling is knowing every single guy. You know, we make it very structured in our bullpens when we're, you know, in the fall and the winter that our guys are catching every single one of our arms. So they have a chance of knowing what is good and what's not. And then from a pitching standpoint, we chart them so our catchers can go back and look at those kind of things. So, you know, I'm probably going to steal that, Buck, and have the catchers start writing some information in because I think that's huge. That way it's just not from a pitching standpoint. But, you know, I just think understanding what each guy has, you know, love, be a chameleon. I think that's outstanding because you have to change and you have to adapt to every situation. But just, I mean, really showing them love. Pitchers have enough stress out there You got to be positive and keep those guys focused on the little things. Sometimes they get themselves all worked up, where they're overthrowing, spiking fastballs, whatever it may be. We got to slow them down and get them locked back into you. And that's, just having that bond. We keep our catchers every single time we have a pitchers meeting. Catchers are in there. That's mandatory from us. And that just keeps them on the same page. So when we're, talking certain words to our pitchers, the catchers are on the same page. So if they have to make a mound visit, they have some maybe similarities that they can talk about.
I love that. I'm glad you said that. That's exactly where I was going to go with this one, that, you got to list first as a catcher and teach second, and then a great opportunity, as you guys have been saying, to learn is in the bullpens. It can be so easy to, be locked into what you're doing, or if there's another catcher next to you, there's two bullpens going on. You got a pitching coach out there that's talking to your pitchers. You want to work well with your staff. That's an opportunity for you to learn. You want to learn what they're talking about so you can relay to them. So I love what you're saying with that, and Keith, talking about the body language, that's something I was listening to Penders at Mohegan talk about that as well too. And that's such a big thing, how you give your sign, your posture when you give your sign, just the nonverbals that give the pitcher confidence. I mean, if you're walking around lazy or upset about what just happened and you're putting down your sign for the pitcher to see that, he sees that too. And that stuff's contagious. So when you have good energy back there, the pitcher sees that, he feels more confident. Now you get more results a lot of the time. So all really good stuff. Really good stuff. So we're going to finish up with our last question right here. A lot of good content already today. Let's finish it up here with just what are some ways that you measure success of a catcher? What are some data points that you go through, or just what are some things that you preach to the guys that you work with, or for the catchers in the room? What should they be concerned about for themselves? Let's go with Keith. You want to start?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things is leadership. You're basically the quarterback of the team. Doesn't matter if you're a freshman or a senior. If you're a catcher, you're the leader. So, again, you don't have to be the most vocal guy, but everyone's looking at you, like I already said. So the body language is big. Being positive is big. Like I said, if you're not having a good day at the plate, you can't go out on the field and let that drag down your defense. Like I said, you're touching the ball every play. If you're an outfielder and you strike out, you can go out in the outfield, you can stand out there, you might not get a ball, you're fine. But you're the catcher, you're going to be touching the ball every play. So staying positive and being a leader, that's how I say I measure my catchers.
Awesome. Great stuff, Keith. Mange.
Yeah, I think this is broad, kind of how I see it, but can we do the things that happen at a high frequency and high value at an elite level and kind of work back from there? But I think when we evaluate, we have to kind of take an individual lens, knowing that every player is different. How they go about kind of creating their value is going to be different. And I think we need to look at value as a whole. Our hitting coordinator, Donegal Fergus, had a good point. He kind of looks at kind of player value as a cocktail, and everyone's going to be different, but they're all delicious. So kind of breaking guys down, and you might have a really, really good receiver but he's a really poor blocker and a thrower. And then your other guy might be kind of average in all three, right? And where do they kind of stack up near each other, and how can we attack their weaknesses? But I also think when you're looking at attacking a weakness, don't be quick, because in some instances, attacking a weakness might take away from a strength. So being really vigilant in that area and not taking away too much, but also trying to boost the other areas that may be lacking.
It's real good stuff. Doc.
Yeah, I mean, Keith took mine. I was going to talk about some leadership, but I'll just touch base off that and what Joe was saying. How they handle themselves out there. Like you said, they are the center of attention. How are they communicating? We talked about communication today. How are they communicating with pitchers, with the coaching staff? Things like that. I think also the relationship with an umpire. I think that's something that is completely forgotten about at younger levels, even our college levels now. I mean, we were all catchers. I mean, the relationship you have with an umpire goes a long, long way, okay? From getting that corner pitch and stealing that strike call, that helps us be successful. right? That helps us get that strike call because we're talking to them the right way. We're not showing them up. We're not sticking a corner pitch. We're doing everything that we need to from our standpoint, okay? And the umpire sees that, so we're becoming more successful because we're helping our pitchers out. So I think that is something that goes a long way with being successful as a catcher, is that relationship you have with him as well. I think that's something that's totally forgotten about in this game.
It's great insight. Buck, bring us home.
I think the most important measuring stick for catchers in our program and at our level is, do pitchers want to throw to you? Do they want you back there? And if a pitcher wants you back there, that means you're doing something right. Things must be going well, at least to the naked eye. It's going to help breed confidence in the pitching staff. They're going to throw with more conviction, and it's the guy on the mound is really going to dictate what's going to happen in this game. There's nothing more valuable in the sport of baseball, or maybe in sports in general, than a pitcher. And you see the contract Garrett Cole just got, that proves it right there, that your pitcher is the most valuable part of your team. But as catchers, we help them realize and achieve that full value if they're comfortable with us back there. So do the pitchers want you back there? That is how I measure success of catchers at our level.
I'll touch base off Buck real quick if you don't mind, and that just goes back, I think, with like blocking balls in the dirt even. You know, it's a seventh inning tying run on third base, and you lay a block, right? They're not going to want to throw that 0-2 breaking ball next time, but you body that ball up, you know, you gain their trust, and they're saying, hey, good block, you know, way to pick me up. And now you got, you know, game on the line. They feel comfortable, you know, throwing that pitch again. You know, I know we have our guys block every single pitch, whether it's nobody on base or a runner on base, unless it's, you know, an extreme pitch way outside. But I think that trust, you know, like Buck is talking about, is huge for sure.
That's really good. It's really good. Anybody have anything to add before we open it up to Q&A? All right. I'm going to give you guys a minute or two. Write something in the chat here on the right, at the bottom. There's a chat with a bubble and some dots in it. You got a question? Write it in there. Turan, I want to see a question.
About baseball.
I'm going to try and share something. I know we got some younger guys on here. I don't know if it'll work. It's just like a pop time thing. Let me see if I can get it here. I have no idea how to share this.
No, it's up there.
Is it up?
Yeah, you can see it.
I think I was talking this with one of my buddies earlier today about pop times, and I think this is something, you know, that kids overlook, and they think that they got to have the best pop time and throw 1/8s and 1/7s and all this and everything. And you know, the average pop time last year was a 2:01 in the big leagues, I believe, from the research I was doing. Maybe even a little bit quicker, like 1/9 something. But either way, you know, you can throw a 1/9, but if you're high and outside on the shortstop side of the bag, you know, you're not being giving your pitcher a shot or your team a shot to get this guy out from a catching standpoint. So this is a great. You can find this on Google. Just typing in pop time chart, and I think this is something that we share with our catchers. And I give them a printout every year so they can see it. But I think it's a great chart just to show that a 2-0 on the bag is more effective than, you know, a 1/9 high and away.
Awesome. Really good. I love it, Doc.
I got something to kind of piggy off that. I think Doc is kind of right on point, where I think a lot of the times, especially as coaches, we get consumed with what the watch says, kind of throw out where the ball actually ends up. I thought this was pretty cool, kind of I don't know if I'm going to be able to share, but metrics are kind of independent of value in the throwing space. So if we look,
I think you should be good now, Joe.
you guys can see that or no?
Yep.
So if we look here, so these were the most valuable throwers in the big leagues last year. And kind of below are kind of the metrics we use. So like pop time, velo, exchange, and then caught stealing. And if you kind of look at where those guys rank out in the metric piece, you'll see that they're pretty average. But when it comes to who is the most valuable throwing the baseball, these three guys kind of top the rest of the league. So yes, we want to strive to have as fast as a pop time as possible and elite velo and exchange time, but knowing that those aren't really barometers of success. And I think consistency more so is what we should look kind of to train and value from a catcher.
Great stuff, man. Great stuff. We've got a question here from Aiden Holsey, and I'll take this one from Aiden. Should infielders do catcher drills? I'm going to answer this a little bit differently. I think that there's value in a couple different things that are similar. I think that, getting your eyes below the baseball or even with the baseball as an infielder is very important as you're fielding a ground ball. So I think that there's similarity as well there. I think that, just working on transfers, working on having the ball close your glove is going to help you get rid of the baseball as well too. And that's something that's very consistent with both infielders and catchers. Does anybody have anything to add on that? All right, we got a question from Jake Carr. A ton of catchers today have softer hands on stiffer fastballs. How do we help our catchers handle the pitchers who are softer throwers or really aren't power guys? That's a great question. Doc, do you want to take this one?
I think there's different ways that you can train that. That you've seen where they put, a cone or some kind of tee in front so you're not reaching out so far. I've seen a lot of people now with the J-bands they put the J-band behind the fence and on your wrist so you can't get out there and get extended and let the ball essentially come to you. I think working soft hand drills with that as well with heavier balls so we can't go out there and just let it get to you. But, really it's just one of those things. It's something that needs to be practiced with repetition, because, again, everyone wants to catch harder guys. How do we catch the harder guys? But the softer guys are the ones that, we need to work on just as much. So I think just repetition, seeing that on a machine, sitting breaking balls even, you can incorporate that because obviously they're going to be slower. So anything that you can do to slow the game down and just keep your catchers back. I like the cone stuff, and that way you can't go out. We always use the analogy, stay inside a phone booth. I know not many kids know what a phone booth is anymore. They don't really have them, but figure you can't go out, you can't get outside that area because you're going to get hit, right? If you start reaching, you're eventually going to, get hit by the bat. And then I think it just puts you in bad habits too. So the more you can teach these guys and give them a visual to stay back, I think helps.
Awesome.
I don't know if anything else to add.
Anybody else have anything to add there? I've seen, Keith, I've seen you do it too, just taking some of the plyo balls and weighted balls and have guys work on controlling that, have guys work on their hip flexibility and mobility as they're moving to the baseball as well too, and controlling their energy in doing so. I think that helps with receiving those slower guys, especially guys with a lot more arm side run or more break. And I've seen you also work with lefty curveballs a lot, because a lot of times, with poor catchers, that's the one that's going to handcuff you the most. And that's one where you're working to kind of get underneath the baseball a little bit more. And you have to do a lot more leg work there to make sure you receive that properly.
Yeah, and we'll use the heavy balls, but then we'll also use the soft tennis balls. And you really got to have good hands. If you're throwing someone tennis balls and catching a baseball glove or a catcher's mitt, it's not the easiest thing to do. So, throwing the heavy balls is great for controlling. But throwing guys tennis balls is also a great drill because, like I said, you have to have really soft hands. You got to get in the pocket or it's going to pop right out. So those are two drills you can do with your guys. Throw them tennis balls. I guarantee you they're going to pop out of their gloves the first couple of times they do it. But if they're getting in the pocket and they're nice and soft receiving it, it's going to start sticking in there.
Awesome.
Yeah, another thing I like to do for that, definitely some of the underload plyos, tennis balls, but even putting guys on unstable surfaces like on Bosu balls, or we have our indoor facility, the track mats for the jumpers, the track and field athletes. I've put our catchers on one of those and they sink into the mat. So it's really anchoring down their base. And it makes it really, really hard to get too jabby or start to reach out in front of them because their weight and their center of mass is caving into the mat. So now they have their hands are super isolated in that kind of situation where it forces them to stay soft and to allow the ball to travel to them.
Yeah, I think just one quick, and these guys didn't leave much, but I would focus on what happens before catch. I think 99% of your focus is what is the glove doing before we actually catch baseball. And I think if you focus there, you're gonna clean up a lot of the issues. A lot of guys who either do a poor job receiving or flat out don't catch the baseball have a big inefficiency in kind of how they load their hand. They're going to come up, they're going to duck off to the side. It's going to make it really, really challenging for them to be consistent. So almost boxing off your focus into before the glove pops can kind of uncover what the issue probably is.
Hey, Marsh, we got time here. I'd like to throw something out to these guys and see if they got anything here as well. So obviously, and this is big in baseball right now, is throwing and catching from one knee. So something that we train with our guys, and I know we got a lot of younger guys on, some other coaches as well. Just want to get your guys' input on it. I have our catchers train it. I'm an old school guy. I do like the 2 feet down and an occasional drop to the knee if we have to get to a pitch. But obviously it's becoming bigger in the majors. We talked about different size catchers this year and getting low, like Keith was talking about earlier. So I just want to get your guys' input on it. One, the stance of one knee down during receiving, and then how it's evolving into our throwing to second base and other things like that.
Man, do you want to start us?
Yeah. I think there's a couple different points to it, and I want to preference, like, just because you go down to a knee does not make you a better receiver. And I think that's kind of what a lot of people are going with this. And a lot of the stuff I see is like, yeah, you are on a knee, but it's a really poor position. It's not functional, and your glove still stinks. So it's not a fix-all. I think an important thing to take note of too is like how you start isn't necessarily how you finish. So if you watch a guy like Mitch Garver, when there's a runner on base, like he's going to start in a very different position than how he finishes. And each kind of phase of the stance has a different purpose. So he's going to start in almost a track start with his right knee down, which is going to allow him to kind of come out of the chute if the guy goes, make a transfer and throw. But what you'll see is as soon as the pitcher lifts his leg and he knows the runner's not going, he'll kind of kick out into a more optimal blocking and receiving position. So I think that's one thing too, is how you start isn't how you finish, and you can almost blend optimal stances for different tasks. And like I said before, kind of making the main thing. So if I'm going to value receiving, and I know there's a high value that's going to come from stealing strikes, I kind of need to tailor my game around that idea. I think the second thing too that gets lost is I think we get a bad rep in Minnesota as only caring about stealing strikes. But for a lot of reasons, the knee down stance is a more optimal blocking position as well. So I think if you go back and look at every missed block you have or every missed block one of your catchers has, it's due to timing. And a lot of the time they're late getting to the ground. So what we do by being on a knee is we eliminate that transfer time, which allows our guys to make a later decision, which actually affects our receiving efforts because we can stay committed to the bottom of the zone longer. So I'm going to steal more strikes, and I'm going to be in a better position to block the ball. There are positions, if you kind of look out there, guys who do it well, there's things you can do in your stance to kind of increase your lateral range, because I think that's the big question is like, oh, yeah, when it's on my body, it's easy. But the second that slider goes right or left, I'm not going to be able to get to it, which isn't necessarily the case. You can work some range in. I would challenge you is just because you can get to a ball out of a traditional secondary doesn't mean you necessarily blocked it well. So instead of just, I think there's kind of a divide between the aesthetics of a block and the function of a block. So I think as catching guys, we were brought up, and some people still view it this way, is if I do this and it looks right, like it should work. And that's kind of my issue with like form blocks and like a 3-ball drill. And yes, they have their place in time, and especially with younger guys, kind of teaching them how to move, but you're teaching one solution to a very variable problem. So if you can almost like rework how you look at it, and as long as the guy doesn't get to second base, like we were good. So I thought the bigger toolbox you can have, the better, if that makes sense.
I love it. That's really good. Really good. Bucky and Keith, you got anything to add?
I was just going to say, a lot of times one knee down, it basically just gets your chest in a better position, helps you get your wrist and your elbow in a better position. But, film from that umpire view like we talked about and see which one looks more like a strike. If you're in your traditional stance and it's looking like a ball whenever you catch it, it looks more like a strike when you're down on one knee, then maybe use the one knee stance. But use that umpire view with that video to really see which one looks better.
Buck, you got anything?
Yeah, I think the data has proven that we're going to be able to steal a lot more strikes in the bottom half than in the top half. Mm-hmm. So how do we maximize our range in the bottom half? And sometimes it comes down to a catcher's body composition. If you have them in a traditional up on 2 feet type stance, and you ask them to put their glove on the ground and their elbow is locked out, and it's a little almost even strenuous to get their glove on the ground in front of them from a 2-knee position. Well, that's going to tell us that we're maxing out how low we can get from a 2-knee stance fairly early. But if we drop down to a 1-knee setup, and now I can put my glove on the ground, and there's still a little flex to my elbow in there, that's going to allow me to have a little more freedom in my movements and have more range in that lower half. So maybe some guys from a traditional setup, they can get their glove on the ground, a little bit of flex in their elbow, and they show that they have that kind of range. Good for them. But that's not for everybody. So again, I think it all comes back down to the individuality and what's going to work best for the athlete.
Awesome. Before we move on, looks like we got a couple more questions here. I want to touch on that real quickly too. And this is just something just along the lines of variability. If you're going to go down to a knee at any point on a fastball, you better damn well be going down to a knee on a breaking ball as well too. We see that a lot, especially with guys that tend to set up early. Guys that we play against, and you see that all over college baseball and even definitely in high school as well too. That catchers are setting up early, and it's giving information to the dugout. It's giving information to potentially the hitter or the coaching staff what is coming on that pitch. So if you're going to set up one way for one pitch, you shouldn't be setting up feet wide for a breaking ball and feet inside for a fastball, or one knee for a fastball. We see that so often. So that's something I think is important to keep in mind as well too. We got another question here from Jay Carr. Does which knee that goes down matter? How would you explain throwing out of having a knee down? Who wants to take this one? Manch?
Yeah, yes and no. I think above all, it's are you comfortable? I think you'll see a lot of our guys use both. We also have some guys who exclusively throw one or the other down. I think without runners on, there's a little bit more play. When we get someone on, just because of the demands of our skill set, at least our guys, they exclusively put their right knee on the ground and kind of start in that track start position because that's how we throw. Throwing stays exactly the same. If you think about it, everything at least in the upper half, but just because our knee's down doesn't really change how the lower half works. It's still a 1-2 go. Kind of where the feet and the knees are positioned are going to change, but I don't have an answer for that because every guy kind of figures it out on their own. But I think I'd encourage guys to just go out and mess around with it. I think bullpens are a really good time. We let our guys have a lot of freedom to try stuff out. Don't make them be perfect. But kind of knowing that, like, use that time to experiment and figure stuff out. And they should always be adapting and changing.
Awesome. Anybody have anything to add to that? Okay. All right.
I think it's just a feel thing. You know, for me personally, like I said, it was something that I've never did as a catcher. When I was growing up, it was something that really wasn't around or taught until, you know, in the last couple of years we're seeing it more of. I think Tyler Flowers probably was one of the first guys you really start seeing getting the one knee down, but he's also like 6'2", 6'3", big dude. But I think it's just a feel thing, like they're saying. I think with the right knee down, it allows you to get that more directional right away. But the lower half doesn't change no matter what knee is down. It's still like Mang was saying, the 1-2. But just a feel.
I've had a lot of guys who they actually like throwing from a one knee stance when their right knee is up and the left knee is down. So they can anchor down on that right foot and almost pivot on it as the left foot comes up. So they've got the freedom of the glove hand here, and they just pivot on the foot that's already anchored into the ground. Because when you look at a lot of elite throwers, you know, this whole old school teaching of, hey, you got to gain as much ground towards second base as you possibly can to shorten the throw. I think that's a really flawed system of thinking, because what it's going to do is it's going to slow down your transfer time in the end. The longer steps that we have and the more footwork that we try to engage in, it's going to slow us down. I think the fastest way to improve your pop time and your throwing, like today, is to tighten up those movements and get the ball out of your hands as fast as possible. Arm strength is something that it takes months to build. It takes a long time to improve upon velo and ball flight and stuff like that. But we can move tighter today with just some different patterning in our feet. So right knee up is actually something our guys were really bought in on this year. But again, it's all about the individual and experimenting and going through this stuff in practice and repping it off the machine and in bullpens. And also as a coach, like, not being afraid to be wrong. Like, we're going to try this today and we're going to experiment with it, and it could get ugly. It might, and that's okay. But we're going to give it a shot here and see what sticks to the wall.
I love it. I got one last question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna just add in. I think one thing to add to kind of the knee down discussion, and pertaining to like throwing, kind of going back to, you don't need to start where you're gonna finish. Like, if you watch Rio Muto, who basically catches exclusively out of a knee down stance, when he gets the runner on base, he'll start in a traditional up stance because he feels more comfortable throwing out of that stance. And you'll see him, if the runner goes, he kind of quarter turns and gets himself sideways so he's in the slot and just ready to go. And as soon as that guy doesn't go, he kind of does like a jump squat and gets in his knee down stance. So again, you don't necessarily have to start with a knee down if that's not comfortable for you. And movement is okay. I think that's also kind of like an old stigma where it's like, oh, I have to set up early, give the umpire to set up time behind me. Like, I don't want to distract him. Like, yes, be vigilant of like how he's setting up and when he's setting up. But as long as we're kind of cognizant of how we're moving, you can move as much as you want back there.
That's great. I got so here's my last question for you guys. This was sent in a private message, but I'm going to read it. We got Ryan Turan says, you know, I tend to see the generic way to receive or old school way to receive is show the target and catch the ball. but I've also started working on, having my glove, and I've been working on that with Keith, working with my glove almost on the ground and working from the ground up from there. Is there a difference here in your guys' opinion, or is there one way that's better than the other, or is it personal preference? Bucky.
So I do think that ideally we like to trigger down with our glove and work from the ground up. I think a lot of that needs to start with communication with the pitchers. Be like, let them know, hey, this is what I'm going to be doing with my glove back there. If you run into a case where there's a pitcher who's like, I got to have a target to throw to. Well, who says it's got to be the glove? Like, why does it have to be my glove? Try and throw it at the Under Armour. Everybody's got the emblem on their chest protector, whether it's Under Armour or All-Star, Nike, whatever it might be. Maybe that could be the target. Maybe that's what they can focus their eyes on, so now I can have the freedom to move my hands a little bit more. I think that triggering down is going to help us work underneath the baseball and be able to manipulate it more. So the trigger down is pretty important. So getting your pitchers to understand that and maybe just realign their focus so they're not so, hey, I need to throw it to the glove. Doesn't need to be the glove. There can be other things that we set up and use as a target.
That's outstanding. I love it.
Very good.
Keith, Doc, you guys got anything?
I mean, that's Buck's right on there. I think, that's right on. And I think there's other ways, everyone's different. Like we talked about earlier, every catcher is different, and everyone's going to, be teaching different things. There's 5 of us on here, 4 of us on here. And, we talk about having pages of notes and books. And, I got a whole page of books on guys that, I've learned from and I'm continuing to learn. So I think what's cool about being a catcher is you take bits and pieces from everybody and make what's own and what works best for you. So just because one of your coaches is talking it, you can go about it and just say, listen, like, what about this? What do you think about this? Well, let's try it. Let's see how our success is from it. At the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing, work low to high, steal the strikes. One thing that we train with our guys, going also, we put wrist weights on our guys. Okay. And that we also can tell then if they're in a normal stance on 2 feet on the ground, are we able to keep that low pitch in the zone, or is our glove getting out of the zone, taking it out, with the velocity of the pitch? If that's the case, we might have to go on the one knee with some of our guys who throw harder and get more uphill and more up angle to it than some other guys. So I think there's ways to train it to see if you're able to do those kind of things and what works best for you.
Awesome. Keith, man, you got any things to add on this one?
One of the big things is just keeping your arm and your wrist relaxed pre-pitch. If you're tight and you're stiff, just like when you're hitting, you're not going to be able to move very fast. So if you're relaxed and you're expecting, let's say, a 90-mile-per-hour fastball, to your right, and you get it a foot to your left, if you're tight, you're not going to get your glove to that pitch. So staying relaxed pre-pitch is really big. Like you said, the pitcher doesn't have to be aiming at the glove. He can be aiming at your chest protector, your mask, one of your knees. Those can be great targets as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think the load is very individualistic. It's a style. You can pull the top 10 guys in the big leagues at receiving, and they're all going to load their hand very differently. But I think you can kind of find some common points inside of that. They're direct to the baseball. They work – it's a one-piece catch, not a two-piece catch. Knowing that some guys need a big move and some guys you kind of need to put the reins on and simplify them a little bit. I think consistency is big. Can you repeat it is a big one. And also not having a move that kind of – you need to be able to catch balls to all parts of the zone with your load. Even at the big league level, pitchers don't throw strikes and pitchers don't hit their spot, which I think we all can recognize. So having an adaptable load, something that maybe it's intended to be to this side of the plate, but I might have to dive back over and putting yourself in kind of the best possible position to make everything look good.
That's awesome. I want to say thank you to, Buck, Doc, Joe, and Josh. Thank you guys so much for spending your afternoon here with us. And I know I got a lot better today just from listening to you guys. And I'm sure I'm going to be going through this video to re-listen to it and take some more notes, as I've been taking notes right here on my Google Docs here. But if anyone here in the audience would like contact information for any one of these guys to follow up with more questions, just shoot me an email and I'll happily provide it. If you have more questions in general, shoot it our way, and the YouTube link will be up shortly, probably in the next day or two. So thank you for spending your afternoon with us here, and we're looking forward to seeing you guys around soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Matty.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely.
Thanks, fellas. Thanks, Matty.